A lot of kindling. Very pleasing.
Nice.
Make sure I'm not blocking the fire with the axe handle there. Since one of us has got a pop.
Yeah. That's my pop.
Every white girl loves that sound, they say.
I would say that I am a caffeine enthusiast.
Enthusiast. Is that an accurate term?
Oh, yeah, I'm into
You
it.
think?
Yeah, not necessarily energy drinks. I mean, I do like them.
Where do you define the line between enthusiast and addict? I'd like to know. I'm asking for a friend. Because it's... Actually, I should just be honest. I might have a problem, and I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Asking for a friend.
Yeah. How much is too much?
What does a booby feel like? Well, it feels like, what does he say?
Bag of sand.
A bag of sand, yeah.
Like, what? Huh?
Yeah, a bag of sand.
Yeah. Oh, my God. No.
I think that'd be a lot less fun if they ever felt like a bag of sand.
Probably be a lot less fun for sure. Oh, man.
Well, guys, welcome back to the Fireside chat. Josh and I were just BSing a little bit before we got going, and Josh was like, we better hit the record button, because I was talking about, I asked him, what's the cheapest arrow you sell?
Yeah, and that was the Gold Tip Warrior, which I believe the Warrior is the ICS Hunter, or not ICS, sorry, that was Beeman, the Hunter series of gold tips that don't make the grade.
That's exactly what our friend Joel thought it was. He said he thought it was the same arrow that they just didn't make the cut or whatever.
Yeah, they're like worse than their 6,000 spec, or the variance of straightness is out too far, or weight variance is out too far. So that's what they are. They're just cheap little logo labeled arrows. And mind you, that Hunter arrow is one of the more popular arrows built. Like dollar per dollar, it's a well-made concentric arrow for the money it is. And I think the high retail on a Hunter XT is only like $100 or a dozen.
What's the Easton Sonic at?
The Sonic comes in at like 120 on the not straight version.
So almost 2 to 1 if you go cheapest.
Easton makes their 6.5s, which are similar price point, but they don't have like a reject. I think a lot of the ones that don't make the grade from them end up as like Gander Mountain arrows or Blackout arrows or whatever, private labeled arrow. I know Victory does a lot of those too, but I think Easton's got a consumer for that somewhere. Or they used to make a white label that was an Easton that was a cheaper, and that was the Reject 6.5. Just because for the longest time that was the number one selling arrow that they had, just for dollar per dollar. So, but yeah, the Gold Tip Warrior, I believe, is the cheapest arrow from a manufacturer that we carry. Somebody out there might have a cheaper arrow, but that is the cheapest one that we have.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can find cheap arrows on Amazon too.
But I want to say they're somewhere between $50 and $60 a dozen.
Yeah,
that's what, $4 to $5 an arrow.
So I'm a little curious, and I think I will definitely do it at some point. Maybe it's already live when this podcast comes out. Maybe it's not, but I want to test out the cheapest arrows against my current arrows just to kind of see how they fly, see how they stack up. And I think my hot take on it before I start is, one, no matter what you're doing, the first most important thing is always to get started.
Sure.
So you'll never get those reps back if you're not doing them. So if you're in a position at which you're like, oh, archery is expensive, or this sport is expensive, or this hobby is expensive, like get yourself some used cheap gear and just get rolling. Because the cost of that experience is priceless. It'll never come back to you. So that's particularly why I've been, I would say within my channel this year, I've had a little more of like a budget mini series that I've touched base on, because I want more people getting introduced to archery or whatever they're interested in. It's like, just get started and then you can, weed your way into the stuff later. And there's always diminishing returns too.
Sure. I mean, it's good to have a resource of how to do this as affordably as possible. Plus, you can there's tricks you can do to arrows that aren't as good to try to make them function closer to as good of an arrow. If you have simply time and means but not money, there's definitely some tricks that you can do to take those arrows that are very basic and make them shoot better to where they would really rival your expensive arrow to a degree.
Yeah. So I'm kind of excited about that right now. It's on my mind.
Well, and as far as getting into a decent FOC configuration, most of those arrows, because they're larger diameter, are actually on the lighter side. So you can make a 400 to 450 grain arrow with decent FOC if you wish to spend money on an insert or that sort of thing, because they don't come with a heavy insert. But I want to say Gold Tip does a brass insert that's not very expensive. So you can take that and put some, I think those are 100. I am making steel inserts for that size of arrow now. They should be in another week or two. They sent me prototypes this week just to make sure I'm good with it, but to offer a better component. And the steel's not terribly expensive, but you're going to spend almost as much on the insert as you do on the arrow in that scenario, because it is a very affordable arrow. But surprisingly, straightness doesn't play that much of a role in how well an arrow flies. It really doesn't. The consistency from arrow to arrow, the spine consistency, the having a decent amount of weight in the front of the arrow, everything being squared and true, going through and trying to figure out where the arrow's inconsistent and removing it in different spots will help.
And then maybe even after you're flying them, if you're seeing a flyer, just rotating the knock. And
Knock tuning your arrows would be very wise in a cheaper arrow, because it'll make a bigger difference. And once again, it's something that if you have time but you don't have money, you can do.
Yeah.
And there's a whole process if you want to talk about it to go through, or if you want to save that for your video and we're just hinting on it here, that's fine too. Really appreciate all the support we've gotten from you guys going forward in this little venture we've taken. We do have a couple of Really appreciate the support we've gotten from you guys in this little venture we're taking. We do have a coupon code for Jocko Fuel, which I do love this one. It's really good, the iced tea. Several are good. It's Josh and Tim on their website. Gives you a little bit of discount. Helps support what we do. And you can also go over to podiumarcher.com, save a little money with coupon code TimC. Help support what we do. Appreciate your support, and maybe a little review. Appreciate it. Something.
No. We can talk about it, whatever. I think it'd be better to talk about it here if we're trying to.
First things first, if you have access to them, right? If you have access to a decent amount of them, weigh them. Like, get a scale, sit down from them, weigh them.
Weigh the shafts before you cut them?
Before you cut them.
Okay.
Yeah, weigh the shafts before you cut them. And then find if you're making 12, find the 12 closest to each other in physical weight. Start there, right? And then get a spinner and spin them. Hopefully you can find, a couple of dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen that are all within a grain and a half, somewhere around there, because you can work that out pretty easily. But get a pile of ones that are relatively consistent, and then go to a spinner and start spinning them and find the ones that spin the truest. And pay attention to both ends. Spin it in the middle of the arrow, and if like one end's really straight and one end's wobbly, mark that you're going to cut off that end.
Say that again.
So when you find a wobbly arrow, it's almost always on an end.
Okay.
It's not like in the middle of the arrow. It's almost like the point end versus the knock end. Because in those arrows, the knock end and the point end are the same. They're not different.
Right.
And nothing's marked or identified. So I would take those and find the ones that at least had one end really straight, because I almost guarantee you all of them have one end that's really straight. And then identify the end that's straight, whether it's the point end or the knock end, who cares? And then cut off the end that's crooked. So if you're going to take a 31, 32-inch arrow and cut it down to 28, in an instance where it's only wobbly on one end, cut the whole length off of one side.
And it makes sense to spin it before you cut them too, because any wobble would be exacerbated, right?
Yeah, you're going to see it more. It's going to be easier to notice. And you may find that the wobble's on the knock end, but the point end's perfectly straight. Well, cut the knock end off then. Big deal, right? And so go through that process, cut them down.
And if you cut the knock end off, would you then re-knock there? And
yeah, you can stick the knock on the other end. It doesn't matter.
I thought it didn't matter, but yeah.
On some arrows it does.
Okay.
But most it does not. Most
What's
are
an
exactly
example
the
of
same.
an arrow that it would?
I don't know if this holds true now, but the older Beeman ICS series of arrows, they were slightly swedged on the one end, if I remember correctly, and they don't fit exactly the same front and back. So, but other than that one, I'm pretty sure they're the same regardless. Unless you're dealing with barreled or tapered arrows where they're different on one side than the other, which are rare. If we're talking affordable arrows, so none of those, because those are all stupid expensive. Those are all bougie, fancy stuff. So once you get to the point that you've cut them, and you then make sure you square both ends. So you're going to take the nocks out all the arrows, period. Square both ends to make sure they're perfectly true and square. And then from there, weigh out your components, weigh out your fletching, and get them to match as you build them. Personally, I'd just fletch them and then weigh out like your inserts and your points and match them together, which if you go back to my building arrows for tack video I did a year ago, it walked through the steps of doing that. It's pretty simple, but you can make your arrows weigh almost exactly the same without manipulating them at all. Like putting glue or lacquer or something inside the arrow to try to compensate weight. If you just do it before you start putting inserts and points in there, you can usually match it up pretty good. And then once you've got that down, I'd immediately walk over to a paper tuner and knock to them, fletched, not shafts, and turn them 120 if you get them to the way they don't look the same going through paper until you get them to look as concentric as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Then put your broadheads on and make sure your broadheads are square and straight. And you'd be amazed how accurate those arrows would be. For the longest time when I was younger, and I might have always been frugal, but I was like really frugal. Like if I was hunting deer, I wouldn't waste money on an arrow because I paid for them. And even today, I can call somebody and they'll send me arrows, but I still just typically grab arrows from the shop that I paid for and not have to mess with it. But back then, I would find the cheapest arrow and hunt with it. I absolutely would. Back then, it was Beeman ICS bow hunters. And I'd grab a 5 dozen bundle and weigh them all out and go through that process because it was time. I had more time than I had money. Right?
Which is usually the flip-flop of life, right? When you're younger, you typically have more time than money. And
so if you can find a place that's got a 5 dozen bundle and they'll let you sit down there and weigh through them and spin through them and grab the 12 most concentric ones you can that are closest in weight, and you'll have a really good set of arrows, and you didn't spend any more money on it, assuming the shop would allow you to. Now, granted, this requires you to have a grain scale. This requires you to have a spinner. This requires you to have an arrow fletcher, because I would strongly encourage a helical fletching jig, because it will shoot way better than a slide offset fletch that you're going to find on a pre-built arrow. Like almost all pre-built arrows don't have helical to them. Now, this is all also understanding and believing that you're not shooting a whisker biscuit. You're shooting some kind of a fall away. If you're shooting a whisker biscuit, you can't shoot a helical. It'll mess the veins up. So assuming you're shooting a fall away, that's a huge, huge plus. And at that point, if you're fletching your own arrows, the cost of the vein is negligible. Like you're not saving a ton, like from 100 pack of AAE or Blazer, you're, $18 to $22 up to some of the more expensive stuffs, maybe $35, $40. I mean, if you allocate that over 100 veins, I mean, it's what, 4 cents versus 2 cents. Cost of a vein difference is a whole 6 cents per 3-fletched arrow. Yeah. Who cares what they cost at that point? So then you can use a vein that you might think will stabilize better or do a better job because the actual cost of the vein is negligible in this scenario. I hope I did that math right. Maybe I didn't.
I don't know. I get it though. I understand what you're saying.
Well, if they're twice, I probably did that math a little incorrectly. Yeah, the veins are like 20 cents versus 40 cents, but still, it's 60 cents. It's still not that much. If you go from the least expensive vein to the most expensive vein, you're maybe spending 60 cents an arrow more.
Yeah, so
but there's definitely a stability difference.
Don't skimp on the veins, and also, there's a little bit of you could buy 100 veins or whatever, they're going to last you a while.
Yeah, I mean,
quite a while.
Yeah, you could do over 3 dozen arrows with a 100 pack.
Right.
That's a long time. And
assuming you're not a 4-fletch guy or 5 or 6.
Yeah, those are getting crazy out there.
Yeah,
there's people selling veins, by God.
Yeah.
But you got to have a fletching jig. Yes, you got to have a spinner. Yes, you got to have a scale to do those things. However, your shop probably has a spinner, probably has a scale, and if you ask nicely, they might let you sit there and go through them if they carry a lot of arrows. Don't show up at a shop that carries 50 dozen arrows total in their building and ask to go through their arrows. They're going to tell you to piss off. But if it's a shop that does, $100,000 a year in arrows, which is not uncommon in the U.S., they probably have enough that they might not care. Like, yeah, go ahead. Just keep them straight and keep them organized. You might even be grateful that you weight match the rest of them to each other as much as possible.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It is something that I have let people do in the past on cheap arrows. But don't ask to pull open match grades and pick through match grades.
Yeah.
It's like those are bundled together for a reason. So, but those are some of the tricks that I would do to try to take cheap arrows and make them perform like quality arrows. Because if you did that versus just a generic match grade built arrow, I bet you they fly better than a factory fletched generic match grade set.
Well, and you got me thinking, even if you're just a short draw length person, maybe your draw length is 26 or something, like there's a lot less that can go wrong with what would that be, like a 23.5-inch arrow versus a 30-inch arrow?
Sure.
I mean, you cut a third of an arrow off, you're increasing the spine quite a bit.
Yeah, you'd be amazed how much of the wobble's gone.
Yeah.
If not all of it. Plus, the wobble is not nearly as critical as the squareness to the and the concentricity or concentricity of the tip coming out of the front of the arrow when it comes to a broadhead. It's drastically important. Like your nock being square at the back of the arrow is also drastically important. Like, but those are probably the most critical parts, in my opinion. If that point's coming perfectly straight out of the front of that arrow and that nock's coming perfectly straight out of the back of that arrow, it honestly doesn't matter if that arrow's crooked. It's still going to fly good because the flex points cause more of a problem than straightness.
Yeah.
In my opinion. But hey, it's just my opinion. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
opinions aren't wrong.
We're sneaking towards hunting season. You know, tomorrow's America's birthday. Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July, America.
Hey,
you made it through this one. I wasn't sure you were going to make it through this one. I'm really not sure if you're going to make it through the next one.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah. Wild times we're living in.
It's very interesting. I believe there's been several comments about we shouldn't talk political, so we're not gonna, but I am gonna say, how about that debate? Not gonna talk about it, but wow.
Yeah. It was a wow.
Oh boy. That was a wow moment, I think, for everybody.
I can comment on their golf swings. I think Trump's swing looks better than it did 5 years ago.
What was okay, this shouldn't be controversial. Who said they had what handicap? I mean, you're a golf guy, right? You said
Trump said he had a 2 or a 3, which I've always heard is a Hollywood handicap, which means it's better than it really is.
Sure.
Which I would believe to be true just based on watching him swing or whatever, which you would need to learn more about their short game and stuff. But I would say Trump has the swing of a 6 to 10 handicap, which is pretty good.
That's it. Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good. And
I mean, I don't know golf, but that sounds like a pretty
it's pretty good. I mean, it puts you in the top.
Low numbers are good in golf, right? Not high numbers.
Yep, it puts you in the top 10 or 15 percentile of golf or whatever.
Oh, there you go.
I haven't actually seen Biden swing. I should have looked it up. I should look up a Biden swing. But I imagine he's not whatever he said he was, 6 or an 8 handicap. I mean,
the funny thing is, who the fuck cares? Like, why are we talking about this? This is the most ridiculous shit I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Oh my God. So, okay, enough of that. Just that was a very interesting debate.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
Quick little hot take.
And I didn't vow one way or the other or comment.
Okay, I got to say one thing.
So
the crazy thing to me about this is most people after that were like, "Oh my God, Biden's mental acuity is not there." And
that did seem to be the common thing that was commented
and why
on,
is that now
on all news networks?
Yeah, across both sides.
Yeah, it was a both sides thing.
And why is that now just the realization? Like, how could you?
My answer to this will get hate, so
I know. We don't
can't
need
answer
to go,
it.
but I just needed to say that is like, if it took you until that point to figure out that not all the marbles are there, like that's not good. That's not good.
Well. Yeah, but once again, it depends on how much you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And two, where you're getting your information.
Yeah, where you're getting
from.
your media and your information.
Where you're getting your information.
Hopefully, you're getting it from the Josh and Tim podcast. Right. Your source for all things politics and archery.
Which, and in all fairness, if you're looking at right-wing sources and Trump had like a whole bunch of cognitive decline, you probably wouldn't see it. Being fair, yes?
Less. Yeah, you see less of it.
You'd probably see less of it. It probably wouldn't be brought up.
Yeah.
Right? So it's interesting that they're all bringing it up now. And I don't know if they're just trying to pretend like they just now noticed on the other networks. Because if you watch a right-sided thing, you're going to see that they've been pointing that out for a while. Which I'd like to think if it was the other way around, they would probably not talk about it, right? So, but that they all just started talking about it. It's almost like they're on board with we need to change the direction we're going.
That was the feel I got coming out of it.
That was definitely the feel that
who knows?
appeared to be going on.
So as it sits, we are...
Neither of us commented it either way for clarification. For the haters down
vote
there.
for Josh and Tim for your 2024 president. Co-president.
We'll run that bitch in the ground so fast. Oh, man.
We are...
Yeah, I'd stop spending money everywhere. There'd be a lot of bad people.
I cut a lot of programs.
I'd cut every program, damn near.
We are 35 days away from most people's pronghorn opener. So that makes us 55 days away from most people's elk and deer openers across the West. And add another 30 days from that, 85 days away from most people's archery opener for whitetail in the East. So it's crunch time, to be honest. if your gear's not dialed now, you should absolutely take this as a moment of like, let's start now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, traditionally in this industry for myself, having worked in it forever, like 35 whatever years, something like that. The fireworks turn lights on in hunters' heads. And bow hunters like see fireworks on the 4th of July, and it's like, ding! Oh fuck! I got to hunt in less than 2 months, right? For those that are hunting your elk and your deer, which is the majority of people. So it's like a switch turns on, and you can watch the traffic flow and the sales and the amount of service work just skyrocket. So if you have waited until now to get your bow worked on, don't get mad at your shop. It is not their fault that you waited till now, and now they're just swamped. And that's what happens. There's no way around that. And any shop you go into is going to be the same scenario. If you wait till after the 4th of July to get your bow worked on or put new strings on or do anything that's service work related that takes time and skill, you're going to be waiting. Now, currently our wait's really short, but I do not expect that to last very long. Well, we also have, let me think, hang on. I think we have 6 techs now or 7. So I don't anticipate our turnaround time to get long, period, other than waiting on strings. Well, it'll take way more time to get strings in than it will take to get your bow tuned by a long shot.
So let's assume we're 30 days away from an opener. So anyone who's 30 days away from opener can use this as their checklist. So 30 days away from an opener, what's the priority list? 1, you should have a bow picked out. It should be tuned, right? It should
30 days of the opener, you should be shooting broadheads out of a tuned bow by now.
Yeah.
You would, because you don't know how that's going to go.
Your third axis should be
dialed. all the
Yeah.
strings and cables on, bow tuned. I mean, if you're changing the strings and cables out, obviously that should have been done already. Tuned, wheeling tuned, arrow good through paper. Hopefully you've shot a broadhead in a field point by now to confirm those hit in the same spot with the broadhead you intend to use. But it is pretty common for people to wait till 30 days out before they start shooting broadheads. But in a perfect world, hopefully it works out right. But you may find that the broadhead that you want to use doesn't fly very good, and you can't seem to get it to fly good for you, for your configuration and your setup, which might entail or require you to change your draw weight, might require you to change the spine of arrow you're using. Now we're rebuilding arrows, and you're running into more time issues, and it might just be simpler for you to try a different broadhead. However, I can't encourage enough. Don't just switch to a mechanical broadhead to make the tuning problem go away, because the tuning problem didn't go away.
Yeah.
The tuning problem's there.
That's the
it
truth
exists,
right there.
and now you just can't see it. That's all. It's like
you're
it's
masking
like,
shitty arrow flight.
Yeah, it's literally like it's like having like excessively high cholesterol, and then all right, well I just won't get checked anymore, and I'll pretend like I'm going to eat better. That's a terrible idea, right? The problem's still there. You're just hoping it goes away or it works out all right.
Yeah, hope is not a strategy.
No. So you need to figure out why that fixed blade broadhead and your field point aren't hitting in the same spot. And there's lots of resources out there, and it seems like every year, almost every channel that I have any involvement in is doing another broadhead tuning video on how to make these things hit in the same spot and what causes it. So if you don't want to go back a year's timeline on everybody's channel to find it, there'll probably be a new one out, and I'm willing to bet you'll probably want to do one. I'll probably do one. Dan will probably do one in the next 30 days.
Yeah, that's one of the videos that all 3 of us seem to make.
We all typically make it. And it might be just specific to one type of setup or whatever. But either way, they're videos that tend to get made this time of year. So there's always a fresh resource because they always get viewed a lot, because clearly this is something people struggle with. It's probably the most common thing people struggle with on short-term timelines, trying to fix the problem. Right. So there's plenty of resources out there that are relatively good. And I can say if it's on my channel, Tim's channel, or Dan's channel, it's right. Whatever the information is there to do is correct. So you can follow that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's similar to paper tuning or shaft tuning. It's the same method. But there's other things to check and measure.
Yeah. So at this point, we have a bow picked out, arrows picked out. We're hopefully broadhead tuned. We're starting to shoot broadheads. Now, typically, if you're shooting a fixed broadhead, it kind of sucks because there's not really a better way to do it than to just buy another pack or two and just shoot those as duds.
Yep.
Now, for you, if you were to run a fixed broadhead and you wanted to hunt with it, would you screw on your new broadheads and shoot them just once or twice into foam just to make sure they're good? Or would you be confident in just screwing them on and shooting them?
I have arrows I hunt with and arrows I broadhead practice with. So I do not fire my hunting arrows at a target.
Keep them as sharp as possible.
But in all fairness, I can build an arrow and broadhead configuration and tell you it will shoot the same. Because I know my broadheads spin perfectly straight and true and square. I know they weigh the same. I know they're all aligned correctly. And I've typically knock-tuned those arrows before I put a broadhead on it. So I know they're going to go in the same spot. So I don't have to shoot those particular arrows. If you don't have that skill set and you don't understand how to do that, or you haven't gone through those processes, you may want to shoot them once or twice.
Yeah, I just have a paranoia in the back of my head. It's like, I just want to see the arrow hit the middle of the target once, and then I'm like, okay.
Yeah, say this is the arrow I'm going to shoot first. I'm going to shoot it at the target once, and as long as it hits the dot or really close to the dot, I'm like, all right, I'm good, fine. But like myself, because I know the requirements to make them shoot the same, and if I build them on that understanding, I typically won't actually shoot that exact arrow until I shoot it at an animal. But if you don't have that, you probably ought to shoot them once or twice. Just don't shoot them more than a couple of times, because just shooting them once dulls the broadhead. It's not as sharp, and then you're not going to penetrate as good or as far, and you wonder why you shoot something and it goes in this far when it should have gone in this far.
Yeah,
there's lots of reasons that happens.
Yeah,
but if you've got I'll usually put together half a dozen arrows that I use for shooting with broadheads, because I'll do that for a month or more before I go hunting typically.
Yeah, you're pretty diligent about getting your broadheads on early or whatever.
Yeah, that's the one thing that that
you do prepare for?
I still actually take that seriously. The other ones I'm just like, I'll be fine. And then there's always a disaster involved and ensues. But hey, I think it's just not nearly as important to me. Hunting is still very, very important to me, and I take it very seriously, because my ability to recover that animal in an ethical manner is promote in number one to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll have 6, and they'll shoot, relatively the same. So I'm like, well, if these 6 shoot the same, those will shoot the same. There's no now if I start shooting 6 and I get some really weird crap out of them, I'm back to the drawing board. These are getting different fletches. These are getting a different broadhead. I'm changing the weight of my bow, something, because this is just shooting like a shotgun out of these ones. And you'll see that. Like if an arrow broadhead combination isn't right for your bow, you back up to 100 plus, just opens up like crazy. You go, okay, this combination doesn't work. And for myself, I just shoot a really long ways away, because if I can get it to group at an excessively long distance, there's nothing wrong with the combination of these products together.
And what would you say the best practice is there? Just shoot as far as you can group? Because not everyone can group a long way away, right?
Well, just shoot a bigger target.
Yeah.
I'll back up to 150 to 200 depending on the bow, because I'll max out whatever my stuff will go to.
Yeah.
And I'll shoot at a 4-foot target. I'm shooting at a 10-inch core, but it's surrounded by a 4-foot target. And every once in a while something crazy will happen, and I'll miss the whole target. Doesn't happen that often. We got a good backdrop, and it's usually wind related because of the way the thermals go, and you can't really read them very well in the evening when we're usually shooting them, me and my cuz. But yeah, that's the first thing I will do is I'll sight it in a bow. I'll end up putting 2 or 3 sight tapes on it to make sure my yardage is relatively close to when I get out to that distance. And I'll immediately take all my stuff over. My first day, I'll make sure my marks are right for distance at 150, so I know I've got a good tape. And then the next day I go over, I'm shooting broadheads. I'm like, all right, screw all this other stuff. Give me my 6 broadheads, and if they only make practice broadheads, I'll have 6 practice broadheads. It don't matter. Whatever it's got to take, and I'll start shooting them, and you'll see really quickly if they group or they don't. And if they don't group, and my cousin will go through 5, 6 different types of broadheads, and that's really all he's doing, is deciding which one of these broadheads flies better. And it was, I have to give a little credit to Sever. Last year, Sever easily flew the best at 150 yards. And no one needs to shoot that far, but
out
if
of
your bow
setup.
will do it, out of my setup.
Right.
Well, and he shot them too, and they shot better than what he had, but he didn't want to change. But I shoot that far because it will show me everything. 100%. You can't hide a thing at that distance. So I encourage people to shoot as far as they can. I really do.
And at that distance, it would be expected, no matter what broadhead you put on, that there's a little more drop from your field points, right?
Absolutely. You will have more drag. And anybody tries to claim that they don't, they're lying. The only way
I've never seen a drag-free broadhead. What would be the point?
So someone, now,
There's a little more
I don't,
surface
I don't,
area
I don't
on
want
every
to get
broadhead.
controversial, but I've been paying a little more attention to Josh Bomar lately because his broadhead's getting insanely good reviews.
It's got
The
a lot of
Beast,
attention.
a lot of attention, and one of the things that they claim is it will shoot exactly the same as a field point because of its aerodynamic and balance point, or something like that. He's made several posts that I've listened to, and I know he gets a lot of hate. I don't know why. I mean, I understand they had a controversial uh, hunting issue, and I know Aaron Snyder addressed it with him at one point. Um, and I personally just think that the hate that he gets is just full on freaking haters. I really believe that because what they supposedly did wrong is something that the majority of people could have easily done wrong and not realized you did it wrong. And to try to claim that he knew better or whatnot, well, you don't know that.
Yeah.
And I still believe in innocent until proven guilty
A
in
lot of
those
it's
scenarios.
speculation, yeah.
It is a lot of it's speculation, but for one reason or another, he gets a lot of hate, and I don't think the guy deserves it. To be honest, now, great, is he a polarizing figure? Yeah. Did he accidentally light his big fancy truck on fire? Yeah, he did. So even if he did it on purpose, like who cares? The amount of attention he got from it. I mean, that's part of this industry a little bit. Is how do you draw attention to yourself, right? But either way, I'm incredibly intrigued by the broadhead. I'm incredibly intrigued by the feedback that I've gotten from multiple reputable people about it. Like there's a lot of really positive things. We are carrying them now. They are on the website, and I will do whatever I can to keep them in stock. And they've sold really fast. Like every other broadhead I've got on the wall, they're selling, but not like insane. I think we've had them up for like 5 or 6 days, and we've sold almost all of the 2-inch 100-grainers that we got. I just ordered 100 more packs of them.
Yeah,
And they are not cheap. They are $60
For
for
three.
2 broadheads with a practice head. It's very expensive. However, the penetration, the feedback, the sharpness, etc. Every person that I know that has tried them, which I know 9 or 10 very reputable people that have tried them, they can't say anything bad about them. One particular person had one blow up, hitting bone on the offside shoulder.
I heard the same thing about a sever.
Yeah, I've heard about it almost every broadhead. So it's kind of I've done it with a fatal steel that I really like. I hit the offside shoulder and the broadhead folded, but it was still intact. It was just bent. Whereas because it's cut out through the middle of that broadhead, you take the core structural strength out of the middle, and it makes it more likely to fail. However, it still looks like it's pretty stout. Like if you look at the mass around it and the attachment points and where the cuts are, I really think it's going to hold up well. That's one of the ones I'm most anxious to try in my broadhead testing to see how well it holds up. But that's a very intriguing broadhead, and that it claims flight that's the same. I will try it. I will try it and test it. I still get nervous because it's outside of my rule of what I would pick to hunt elk with. I won't usually use a broadhead that has a 2-inch cutting diameter to hunt elk with. I traditionally prefer something that has 3 blades, but I normally won't exceed 1.5 inches, period. And they don't make 1.5 inches one. So if I was to use that head, it would have to be 2. And they don't make one out of hardened metal. They only make it out of aluminum, or I should just say titanium or steel, because normally that's it. But because there's so much hubbub about it, and I've talked to Josh about it several times, I will give it a shot. I will play with it. It's the first aluminum broadhead I will try to include personally to see if I feel it's the best option.
And my understanding of aluminum is not all aluminum's created and manufactured the same either.
No, there's a whole bunch of different series of style of
Yeah.
aluminum, and there's treatments that can be done to it. And there is something to be said about the fact that mass, right? So if you have 100 grains of steel and 100 grains of aluminum, there's a lot more aluminum there, right? So it's not just physical weight, it's also mass, which is why I like titanium so much, because titanium and aluminum basically weigh the same. They're super similar. So you're not giving up the size of the projectile. You're just making a much harder metal, which KSI is a term I've learned recently, and it's how they measure how hard metals are. And steel's like 30-ish, depending on the type of steel, and titanium's over 100. I think aluminum's like 20 or somewhere around there. So the characteristic of a titanium and a broadhead, to me, it's kind of like a no-brainer. Why aren't all broadheads made out of titanium? Personally, and I say that from the standpoint of broadheads should be expensive. It's what's killing the animal. Your arrow is just the thing that gets it to the animal, right? You shouldn't be cheap with a broadhead ever. Like if you gave me $1,000 to build my entire hunting setup, I would probably spend a quarter of it on my broadheads and cheap everything else, because that is going to determine how it dies. Because like most things, the broadhead largely determines how it gets there to begin with,
Yeah.
because it usually gives you the flight characteristic problems, and how well it penetrates and kills the animal. This whole, I know Iron Will coming out with, what are they, $40 a broadhead? Broadheads kind of freaked everybody out. That's how expensive broadheads probably should be. It really is. Like it or not, hate all you want. That's probably the reality of what is most important. You should not be cheap on broadheads. You just shouldn't. Typically, the more you spend, the sharper they are, the better they hold their sharpness, the better they fly, and the more concentric they are. In order to get a broadhead to come out of an arrow straight, you got to run the machine at a slower rate. You crank up the speed of a machine, it gives you more variance in the quality or the QC of the product, right? So if they got to slow that sucker down to make sure it's perfectly straight every time, it costs more money to make because that machine's running slower. Like, you should not skimp on broadheads ever.
What does the term Rockwell refer to?
It's hardness.
Yeah. So what's the difference between KSI and Rockwell?
Well, Rockwell hardness, I want to say, is the process in which they treat the metal to make it harder. Like the standard KSI, it's crush strength or something is the KSI. I don't know exactly what it stands for. I just know it's a measurement that is used to determine how hard a metal is. But Rockwell hardness, I want to say, is also part of a process. I am not an expert. I'm probably saying it all wrong. I just know that the KSI differences between titanium, because of something I had to deal with earlier this year, between titanium, steel, and aluminum are very different. And that's a measurement of how hard the metal is. As a raw metal, not necessarily a process that is treated after. Like heat treating things and whatnot also change that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, broadheads are really important. They've also stirred up so much buzz on the internet the last five years or something like that. Like,
It should be stirring up buzz for the last 30 years because
Yeah.
it is absolutely the most important thing. All the hate that the heavy arrow guys have versus light arrow guys stuff is all about your broadhead. It's very obnoxious. Honestly, it does not make a difference. I mean, yes, is there a measurable difference? Yeah. Is it very small? Yeah. Is it way more? Is it way more important to give the animal less time to react? Yeah.
yeah.
Like way more. But
Yeah, it's interesting.
it's all based off of, well, we're not penetrating enough. Well, you're not penetrating enough because you're using a broadhead that doesn't penetrate. And this all started when people went to mechanical broadheads. No offense to mechanical broadheads. I'm not saying they're all bad. There are good options out there. But this started when people started to try to chuck a 2.5-inch cutting diameter device through an animal when they were using an inch.
No.
That's 2.5 times the force, everything else being equal. That's important. And there's so many things that aren't being measured or accounted for, which I'm hoping to try to give context to going forward.
Out of so many setups that aren't perfectly tuned, like
Yeah.
I would just say traditionally, at least the era I grew up in on the east side of the Mississippi or the Midwest or whatever, like the attention to detail on setups was so much less than it is in the West.
Well, there's logical reasons for that.
Right. I mean, typically it's a 20-yard shot.
Yeah.
But even still, I mean, how much energy would you bleed on untuned versus a tuned setup at 20 yards? Like, it's considerable.
It is. But
especially when you chuck a big fat thing on the end of that arrow.
But because they don't have to figure out and make it shoot accurately at distance, they don't ever deal with that. Now, once again, that's a generic term.
Yeah.
There are people east of the Mississippi River that can drive tacks and are really proficient at what they do.
Yep.
But that's a lot of the reason why you don't have the quality of shop, which once again, I'm sure there's quality shops over there. Who's calling? All right. I'm sure there's quality shops over there. I'm sure there's, really accurate stuff out there. But in general, because the precision requirement isn't nearly as high, you don't get the precision equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because we hunt in an environment where we have to shoot farther away, we don't get that luxury. We have to make our stuff shoot well, or you'll never shoot accurately at distance.
Mm-hmm.
So, for whatever.
Yeah, that's all generic, right? But definitely, I mean, in the era I grew up in the area I grew up in, like, it was like, oh yeah, slap a broadhead on. I didn't even hear of broadhead tuning. Like, it was common that if you didn't hit where your field point hit, you just moved your sight. You know, Like,
Well, and I got to confess, when I was young, that was common. Joe, just bump your
Yeah.
sight a little bit.
yeah.
And that drove me nuts. I was like, well, but that can't be right.
It-
There's
I-
something
I
wrong
knew
here.
something in my head said it wasn't right either, but
Yeah. And that's when I started really messing with it
Yeah.
a lot, is that was just the accepted nomenclature when I started. It was like, well,
Mm-hmm.
just, you got a sight in for broadhead, so go shoot your broadheads and then move your sight. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, what? Oh, yeah, the flight characteristics of a broadhead are way different. I was like, but it weighs the same.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
What's going on here? And then you started playing with it a lot. And that, once again, quality of broadheads up to that point were not good.
Yeah, they were kind of dog
So
cheeks
you
too.
would get stuff that didn't shoot very well. I mean, that's pretty normal. And now
On aluminum arrows that might not spin right
yeah. Well, actually, aluminum was really concentric.
Was it?
Yeah, as long as the arrow hadn't been shot
until
to
it
where
got
could be
bent. Yeah.
But as long as that, like the tolerance between an aluminum insert and aluminum arrow and whatnot was really tight. Actually, it was really good. So, but yeah, I think it was quality of broadhead, and broadhead options just were not quite as good. And as that evolved, you started paying more and more attention to things, right? But yeah, it drove me nuts. That was one of those things. I'm not accepting this answer. I'm sorry. I don't like this answer. I need to figure out why and what you can do to make them hit the same. And then really short, squatty broadheads started coming out, and all of a sudden you could shoot in the same spot. It's like, well, okay, what's the difference between that, and what's causing this? And you started spinning things and checking things, and you ended up with a lot more accurate piece of equipment. But it was always the broadhead. It was always the broadhead. It wasn't like hardly anything else. It was almost always the broadhead was the problem. So that's why you don't cheap on broadheads.
Yeah.
Cheap broadhead's bad.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, I can't even think of one person I know currently, although that might be untrue this year because Dan will probably use a light arrow and an iron will. But I can't think of anyone who uses like a light arrow and an iron will. You know what I mean?
I bet you Dan might change by the time hunting season actually rolls around. We'll see. He's playing with a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
But he's been riding that iron will wide for a while.
But usually it's
that.
lighter arrows and expandables or heavier arrows and fixed.
Yeah.
But I don't really hear stories about lighter arrows and, super sharp.
If you're concerned about penetration, you're probably using a broadhead designed to penetrate. If
Yeah.
you're concerned about speed and flight time, you're probably using a mechanical
Mm-hmm.
because it typically is easier to tune. So the label of lightweight gets stuck with a mechanical broadhead, and the label of heavy gets stuck with a 3-to-1 cut ratio Wenzel Woodsman style head that penetrates through like you can shoot a 40-pound recurve at an elk and you'd probably penetrate through it.
Shoot it through a car door or whatever.
So you don't typically see the crossover of this massive penetration device with a really light arrow behind.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing what that configuration will do, by the way.
Yeah, that's got my brain stewing on that a little bit. I'm just kind of curious what it would do.
It goes sailing through it like butter.
Yeah.
Like if you get a really sharp, like there's still some things that people don't play with that I don't understand, and it's something I'd want to play with. But dude, I don't have to.
Yeah.
Like get the weight of the broadhead down, but have it still be big and sharp and elongated. Right? How do you get the weight down? Do you use carbon for a ferrule instead of the central?
I wonder if we're ever going to see a 3D printed broadhead.
It's probably not hard enough.
That's what I'm wondering. Is there a material?
I bet you it would break. But I don't think you need to do that. I think if you could make something out of like carbon, because carbon's durable. It'll flex, but it won't break. Like if you constructed it right, and then titanium's hard to get really sharp, so you still probably got to use steel in your blade. But maybe there's a way to have your blade weigh less, but still be, longer and still be really sharpenable, and just get the extra mass out of the ferrule. Because the physical weight of the mass of a durable ferrule is the problem. And you look at an iron will, and 90% of the weight's in the blade, right? Because they're really thick and they're really hard and they're really, I don't know the technical number. Bill would tell you right off the top of his head, but it's like the best steel you can buy to make something sharp out of, which is part of why they're so expensive. And I give him credit. Like he assessed that more than most people did, that this is the most important part of your arrow. He doesn't, skimp on anything else, but that is by far the most important part is your broadhead, hands down.
Yeah. So, you or I aren't hunting. Well, I mean, you're maybe 5 weeks out or something. Do you know? Are you gonna use a special arrow for antelope? Do you know?
I'll use something light and fast.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
But it's not the same arrow you're gonna hunt elk with.
I don't know. I ended up hunting with the same thing for elk in Idaho last year.
That's what I was wondering.
I did. I used a really light and I got 28 inches of penetration. So it's kind of hard to argue with. And then I killed my bull in Washington with a total 400 grain arrow at 70 pounds and got full pass through.
Mm-hmm.
So with a mechanical broadhead. So I don't know.
I was just going to say right now, as you go into season, you're
I
leaning
may or
towards.
may not have something new to play with before then. So
Yeah.
it's time was going to tell on what.
But you're
arrow
leaning
item is.
towards, roughly 400-ish arrow.
I'll be really surprised if my total weight's more than 400 grains on anything.
And you'll
It's
be
just
30,
how stupid light I get.
30-inch draw.
Yeah.
Do you bump up to 75-pound mods or?
I shot 80-something pounds on my my antelope and elk setup in Idaho last year. In Washington, I was using 70.
You bumped up to the heavies?
I did.
Until late
I
season?
can pull it. It doesn't feel hard to pull for me. But late season, I went to a lighter. I grabbed a lift right when they
Changed
came
your
out
mods, yeah.
and just wanted to play with one of those.
Yeah.
Honestly, didn't at that draw length and that shorter bow, I didn't like it. I struggled with it, but I'd already built it and I got it to tune relatively close. And I was going hunting in like 2 days, so I'm like, all right, let's take this. And it did the job. I can't complain to it. My draw length on a 29.5-inch axle to axle bow was not comfortable at all, but it worked. I wouldn't want to shoot it at any kind of distance. I'd like to see a bow that peaks at like 31 inches in a shorter axle to axle, but that's hard to design. The cam's got to get so stupid big, and it's impractical from a manufacturing
Dart
standpoint.
and consequence.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, well, it's the same thing, Core SS, but they're longer. They're 30, 31. I wouldn't mind a 29 or 28-inch axle to axle.
What is the consequence? Is it 30?
I thought it was 30.
I thought it might have been 29.5, might be 30.
Yeah, good bow. Lot of. We saw a lot of them.
A lot of love from our locals too.
Yeah.
Like Joel Neubauer told me yesterday that he shot his best 90-yard group ever with those really cheap arrows and a Dart and consequence.
Yeah. You do it right, you're good.
Yeah, I've had a couple of local guys who have bought one as their intent was typically to have it as like a backup bow. And everyone that I've talked to is like contemplating hunting with it because they really like it. Have you had a negative chunk of feedback yet on it?
On the consequence?
The consequence, yeah.
No, hey, shh.
On the consequence, yeah.
No, it's all been good. I think the only gripe was actually from Darton, and they made it too cheap, and they're gonna have to raise the price up here pretty quick. And they went from a billet to a forging,
Well,
because it got the cost.
I don't know what their margin is, but my advice to Darton would be to, if they can maintain the margin, to keep doing it because it's actually putting their brand name out to people who would otherwise never have it in their hands, and then it can be an entry point to the brand.
Yeah.
I
think that was the whole point.
Because if nobody knows about you, nobody's going to buy your stuff, Darton. And right now you have people buying your gear because you made this really great bow at a very competitive price point. And if you can maintain that margin, even if it's like the thing you don't make money on, every business has things that bring people to their brand. Some websites sell things at a loss just to get the traffic on the website because you will make money in other places. So I don't know. I hope that they can have a competitive product like that in the future. Cause
if they were smart, they'd make that bow in a 33 next year and be like $100 higher, $150 higher, and that which is traditionally a bad price point in archery. I don't know why. $800 to $1,000 is usually a really hard price bow.
Yeah,
to sell.
because you just jump up to the next.
Because you're close enough to the $1,200, $1,300.
You just bypass it. You're like, if I'm going to spend $1,000, I'll spend $1,200.
But I think that used to be on when the high end bows were between 1,000 and 12. Now they're 13 to 14 ish, somewhere in there. So I think there's enough gap in there that if somebody makes a really good $850 bow, I bet you it does well. If they don't skimp.
Yeah.
If you're deliberately leaving features out to try to justify the fact that you make a $1,300 bow or a $1,200 bow, which is traditionally what happens in that category, you're probably not going to do super well. But if you just give it all the features like the consequence does in a $800 price point on a 33-inch bow, or a little longer Western bow, I bet you'd crush. So, but who knows?
Who knows?
Either way, we've sold a crap ton of them, and we're not completely struggling to keep them in stock, but it's been challenging. We've sold a ton of them. It's a good bow.
Yeah.
Hats off, Darton. Good job. Even if you did price it a little too low and you got to change the price.
Very good job.
I think they're going up $50 or something, and I thought it was July, like now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think we've changed our price yet, but they're going up like $50, which ain't a lot. I mean, it's still a good price.
Yeah, I think it is a good price. Yeah. I think I will do we'll see. But I mean, I think that's going to be my tree stand bow. You know,
Yeah, it's a great bow.
I do have
Short
a little.
axle to
I do
axle?
have a little squeak. We got to remedy.
Where's it come from? You know.
I talked to our rep, and he thinks it was coming from the limb pocket. Maybe it might need some
Yeah,
grease.
that's not uncommon. Sometimes, depending on how they design their limb pocket and what goes in it, a lot of times it eventually dries out, and like the limb flexes a little bit in the limb pocket, and so it might rub on something aluminum in there, and you line it with a lithium grease or something along those lines. It usually makes it quiet.
I got to get that out and take a look at that. But yeah, it's such a weird year for me coming up. It's the first year I don't have one hunt planned in the fall, other than I know I'll hunt Washington whitetails or Washington deer of some version. But other than that, it's just going to be kind of what comes to me, which is going to be a weird year. But, you know, sometimes good stuff comes from that.
Well, yeah, if you have openings and opportunities, sometimes opportunities that present themselves at a reasonable price.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, there's some beauty to having some things unscheduled because if you don't have the freedom, you don't know what opportunities you could take advantage of. So it's kind of a weird year for me that way. Do you have any like pinnacle hunts on the schedule? You got your annual pronghorn.
I've got my annual. I've got pronghorn.
You'll probably shoot a pronghorn at what, like
elk in both states,
175, 200
deer.
yards or something like that.
Be a 15-yard shot this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got deer, elk, bear in both Washington and Idaho. I have two later season Texas hunts now.
Oh, you
They're
did?
both for whitetail.
Yeah.
Well, I did one early in the year with my my Stone Glacier crispy sales rep buddy, who I was like, "Hey, you ever get a good deal? I want to give me a shot. I'd like to go with you." And one of the guys going used to be my Bowtech rep from way back when. Really good dudes. I enjoy the time with them. And I've never gone on a hunt with them, so that would be cool. And then Dan invited me to his place that he goes every year with his friends. I met them down in Big Sky and
Down in Texas?
yeah. So it appears like I'll be doing that. I don't know when. I don't think he set a date yet.
I think it's later in the year, yeah.
And I've been talking to my buddy Ray has a ranch in Mexico.
Oh, really?
For mule deer / coos deer, and I may end up doing that.
Oh.
I was going to do that. He tried to get me to come down for a coos deer hunt during the COVID time while I was married, and my ex-wife would not let me go.
It would have been scary.
If you get on a plane, don't come back.
Yeah.
And I was like,
okay.
but it's free. I was like, ah. And the unfortunate thing was, it was when Tim Gillingham was going, and I've never actually sat down and ring with Tim Gillingham.
Yeah,
and
you guys would probably make good friends.
Got to know him. I think that would be a very intriguing thing. But I had to bow out of it. And I honestly, I should have just gone. I got divorced anyway. I should have just gone.
It would have been scary though, because remember at that time.
No, depend. It was the timeline of it. It was beyond, and I had made up my mind.
Oh, okay.
It was beyond that timeline. I had made up my mind.
No, but what I'm saying is, if you would have got COVID tested positive in Mexico, you would have been held there, right? Like you couldn't have.
Yeah, but I think I'm trying to remember what was going on there. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I flew into Mexico. I think I flew into America and then drove over. Was the deal. But either way.
Yeah.
So, and Ray has a house down there and whatnot. I had to just stay down there.
Would have been cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely something to take advantage of.
Either way, we're hopefully I'll do a big what is that, Sonora mule deer or whatnot. Yeah, I mean it's time. My schedule's getting to where I can go do those things, and it's not terrible.
Yeah.
And they're just going to get more costly. So hoping on those, and if something else presents itself and I can squeeze it in, I will. As long as I'm here when new bows come out, we're fine. Because there's a window in there, and I usually coordinate with most of them to know when they're coming, and I'll stay here and crank out a whole bunch of content for like a month. And have it all preloaded and ready to go, because I don't hold the bow videos. The day they're released, they go. So to have regular content on top of that, I still have to have other stuff. So. And by then, it might be a whole pile of content, folks. Stay tuned.
Yeah. Yeah. Take advantage, because I think it's smart. If you push it off, like do it while your legs are good, while your eyes are good, while you. Even before you really just...
I've looked at this for 20 years, and what it costs now versus what it cost then, when I thought it was ridiculous then, it's like, dude, you're dumb. You should have done this 20 years ago and just figured out how to live with it and maybe not have as many assets or be in as better of a financial position, but you'd have like all that done. Like we just had John Pinch out yesterday, who is like a world-renowned rifle guy that also does archery, and he's got one animal left on the North American Super Slam, and he's 2 years younger than me, and he's a landscape guy. Like he's not wealthy. Now, granted, he just handed that business off to his brother, which it was a small business. It wasn't like a big, massive empire or anything like that. And he's managed to get through it. Granted, he had a hunting partner of his that is relatively well off, and that helped because a lot of the stuff he didn't actually have to pay for.
Could help share some costs in some areas or whatever. Yeah.
But he's got one left, and he drew it on the raffle in Oregon.
Oh my God!
And he's from Oregon, like his hometown, his home state's Oregon. So the final animal will be hopefully harvested in Oregon, and
in his home state.
Yeah, and
very cool.
What is it? Braylon Shockey?
Brandlin. Yeah.
So they were doing him and Matt. You remember Matt Outline?
Yeah.
All right. So him and Matt.
Yeah, he talks shit to me every year leading up to Top Pin.
Yeah, Matt's a big shit talker. He's the king shit talker. I don't know if I've known someone who's a better shit talker than Matt.
I thought I was better at it than him, Matt.
No, you have some skill. You have some skill. But if we had to rank it, I would put Matt ahead of you.
Yeah,
I actually would. But they were doing they've shifted over to lifestyle stuff that is related to the outdoor industry and not really hunting. And they were with John and Matt filming some stuff, and he snuck off to watch the raffle drawing, right? And he didn't want to tell him why. He was kind of like secretive about it and whatnot. And they ended up actually recording it and caught him winning on film.
Wow!
And he said, "Well, now we gotta record your hunt."
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a video.
Wow, very cool.
For that.
What a great story.
Yeah, which from the guys that don't want to do hunts anymore, they're still going to do it. So that's pretty exciting. And he came up and he's got a Hoyt Alpha X33, and we built it and tuned it and did a little.
He's going to do it with his bow.
Oh yeah, he wants to do it with his bow.
That's awesome.
He can take both, but he wants to do it with his bow. And we built that bow yesterday, and Matt had one too. We threw together, and they did a little shoot against Dan, and you'll have to watch that video to find out the outcome of that. But brand new bows, they just sighted in, tuned, and did really well. So, and he's good with a bow, even though he's a world champion gun guy. He's good with a bow.
Seems like those precision sports carry over.
It's amazing how many guys do the same. Like and he had said if they're not doing like long distance rifle stuff, he doesn't want to hold a gun. He wants to hold a bow.
Mm-hmm.
But that still has a level of precision that correlates to being able to shoot a bow well.
It does, yeah. It just seems like it carries over well, and maybe it's just the ability to control yourself in those moments and be present and, stay calm or focused. And yeah, I've seen a lot of those guys do well in both sports, and there's definitely a correlation if you want to make a bullet fly a long ways and you want to shoot a bow really well. Like, there's definitely some skill transfer, and, you got to have really tuned gear to do it too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the precision requirements are pretty insane, which has tuned out really easily. Matt's needed some work. But, but they were flying really well when he left.
The interesting thing I've kind of made a correlation with recently is like every gun wants to take some kind of bullet load, right? Like there's a certain powder and bullet combination that's going to fly the best.
Yeah.
And that does seem to be true out of a bow too. Like bows seem to want to feed some type of bullet the best.
Well, and they're actually building rifles as a business now.
Oh.
And it hasn't been profitable because they have to reject so many barrels. Like when they get them all built, tuned up, try to get something to match together, and it's like 3 out of 10 work really good, and the other ones don't.
That'd be so frustrating because it'd be so tedious to lead up to that point.
And there's so much time in it. It's like, dude, you're nuts. Like this is really hard to get work right. I don't have I'll get like good example. We had one bow that tuned really good and one that we fought a lot to try to get it to work right. And I'm assuming it's a similar thing. But I have yet to completely reject a bow, or I'll send it back and get a different one, and then I won't have to pay for that bow to get fixed. Whereas they have to eat the machining in the barrel for the most part. It sucks. So I don't envy that, but they'll get it figured out.
Yeah. Anyway, our fire's out. Go shoot your bow.
Like that.
Get ready for season, and go shoot your bow. Get ready for season. Subscribe to this wherever you're listening or watching. Leave it a review. That stuff helps more than you know. And yeah, man. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, a review would be fantastic. That would be. I really appreciate those. That goes a long way for us. And you definitely need to be shooting broadheads and field points right now. Don't push it off. Get on it right away because that's where the problems come from.
Good stuff. Catch you on the next one.